My wife, 32 at the time of this story, went to college with this girl, who became her best friend. They partied like wild women, so much so that it's a wonder my wife didn't flunk out of college. I, 35, met my wife on her first day at work. I was already working there for a few years before she was hired, so I was in charge of showing her the ropes. Eventually, we got married, which brings us to where the story begins. After we had been married for 6 years, her crazy college friend finally got engaged. My wife was surprised that her friend was even willing to settle down and perhaps invite her because she got more time as a single lady or whatever. We had agreed early on as a married couple that she wouldn't remain close to this girl anymore for the sake of our relationship. One night, shortly after she found her friend was engaged, she told me she was going to spend the evening with her parents and wouldn't be back until after dinner. This wasn't totally weird, so I said that was fine. When I got home from work, I went to take out the trash and could see something like a postcard through the side of the bag. Curiosity got the better of me, so I read it through the plastic. It was an invitation to a bachelorette party that very night. It was being held in the city at a men's strip club. I drove there without hesitation. I didn't want my wife looking at other men or becoming influenced to act like the party girl she had grown out of. When I got there, I started asking women around for my wife or the bride by name. Eventually, I found a woman who said they had left the party a short while ago with 2 men. When I asked where they went, she hesitated to tell me. I begged and bribed her, so she gave me the name of the hotel. I could not believe this was happening. I started calling my wife's number over and over until I arrived in the lobby. She wouldn't answer. I asked the receptionist for their hotel room, but she wouldn't tell me. I waited for a while until I saw her come off the elevator with a man. He looked quite pleased, and so did my wife, until she looked up and saw me standing in their path. She gasped, covered her mouth, and tears started flowing uncontrollably. When the man was told I was her husband, he looked away, down, and grimaced. It wasn't his problem, but he didn't like being caught in the crossfire. I asked what had just happened, and my wife just looked stuck. She managed to speak and say she had made a bad decision to party tonight, and asked if we could go home to talk about it. I asked her again what they had done, but she just stared at me. She opened her mouth but couldn't answer me. She grabbed my hand and tried to leave the lobby. I pulled away and said I wasn't taking her back home if she had just cheated on me. She couldn't function, so she sat on the lobby floor and cried. Her friend came down and was shocked at the sight. The truth came out that my wife had lied and had told her friend we had been separated for months. Eventually, we were sitting in my car, but before I drove anywhere, she told me she couldn't help it. She just couldn't resist having some fun with her friend. Fun that I wouldn't approve of, because it wasn't moral or honoring the vows we took together. So she lied and did it anyway. She said after being married for a while, she was longing for something exciting to happen. At this point, I had heard enough. I summarized for her that she felt bored and unimpressed with our relationship, so she cheated on me. Then I told her I was done and wouldn't forgive her for this. I didn't want to be married to her anymore, so she started wailing. She got out of the car after I asked a few times, and I drove away. Her brother ended up letting her stay with him and came to my house to get her stuff a week later. After a month, he was tired of having her live with him. She was miserable and couldn't bring herself to go to work or find hope in the future. She called me all the time, asking me what I was doing and begging to come over. I said no every time. I didn't want to be around her or be persuaded to let her back into my life. Women can be slippery snakes when they want to be, and after she proved herself to be like that, I couldn't take any chances. I said no repeatedly until I just stopped answering her calls. I don't plan on ever being taken advantage of again, but if this taught me anything, it's that I can't control what my spouse does. I can only trust and act in self-defense if necessary. Even though I loved her for many years, I knew I could do the same for another woman someday. It's been 2 years and my ex still lives at her brother's house. Now they hate each other and she's become bitter that I never forgave her for one night of fun. Despite thinking she deserved this night of fun, Now she preaches on social media about how wrong partying and drinking is. OP, I am sorry your wife lied to you and chose to cheat on you at her friend's bachelorette party. She made it clear that what she wanted, no matter how bad it was more important than you. She felt bad about it when she was caught, but only because she didn't plan on getting caught. She became bitter because she never thought her choices would bring undesired consequences. She made it seem like the years you spent together were like putting her life on hold, and no one should be made to feel that way. What she did was completely unfair and unforgivable. I'm so glad you found the invitation, and then her too. As sucky as that night was, at least you found out the truth for yourself. You're very wise not to let her back into your life, not even for a second. I wish you the best of luck going forward. Now for today's second story. My wife, 27, had a major problem with comparing herself to her younger, prettier sister Madison. Madison remained single and never gave up pursuing her dream career. She was quite successful and had a TikTok fan base, which just irritated the crap out of my wife. But she never admitted she felt this way about her sister. Sometimes she vented to me about it, but she always backtracked afterward by expressing love for Madison. My wife even went so far as to ask me while we were dating and even after we were married if I wished I had met her sister instead. I always said, of course not, and that I believed we were meant to be together. I also told her that she deserved to have a happy life, apart from her sister, regardless of what she was doing with her life. However, my wife never understood the message I was trying to convey. She kept stalking her sister and comparing our life to others. Despite this, she was always supportive and never showed any signs of jealousy when talking to her sister directly. Everything fell apart when Madison got engaged. We agreed to meet them for dinner, and her fiancé was a successful and well-put-together man. They were a perfect match, and I was genuinely happy for them. However, my wife was not. She pretended to be, but as soon as we got in the car, she started acting strange. She was quiet and on her phone more often than usual. I suspected that she was stalking Madison's fiancé on social media. After a few days, she started acting friendly towards me again, and over the next 3 weeks, she met with her sister a few times without me while I was at work. The first time, she didn't tell me about it. I found out because the security alarm kept a time-stamped record of all our comings and goings. After she went out 2 more times, I asked her what was going on. She said she was meeting with Madison because she was starting to have second thoughts about trusting her fiancé. This didn't make sense to me because they seemed happy and confident together when I met them. I started looking at Madison's Facebook while my wife was supposedly meeting with her. She seemed perfectly content with her fiancé and even posted happy updates about their wedding planning. I finally messaged her asking if she was with her sister at that moment. She replied no and asked why. My heart sank, and I explained that my wife had told me she had been meeting with her a few times that week. I could tell she was starting to worry because she mentioned that her fiancé had been going to the gym more often. She said she was going to try calling him to see if he would answer, but he didn't. We couldn't see either of their locations either. She went to the gym, but her fiancé wasn't there. So, with no other options, we waited for them to come home. Madison texted me that her fiancé had arrived at her house at the exact same time my wife pulled into her driveway. When she walked in, I freaked out. I tried to remain calm, but my voice started cracking, so I started yelling. I told her I knew she wasn't with her sister, and her fiancé was missing too. She had the audacity to accuse me of liking her sister after all, since I admitted to messaging her. Before I could say anything, she said that I could have her sister now because she wanted a divorce. I was completely shocked by her words. I told her I didn't like Madison, and she only helped me realize that she was lying to me. I demanded to know where she was, and why she suddenly wanted a divorce. She said that Madison's fiancé had been AP loved her now. He realized how amazing she was compared to her little sister, who was afraid of commitment. I looked her straight in the eye and told her she was crazy and cruel for taking her sister's man from her when they seemed so happy. I insulted her, so she slapped me and walked out the door with luggage she packed in advance. She was acting so ridiculous, like she thought AP and her were meant to be, and by leaving me as quickly as possible, she'd be with him forever. I called Madison and she answered it, even though she was in the middle of screaming at AP. I heard him crying and apologizing to her. She dismissed him and went into another room to tell me what he told her. That my wife persuaded him to meet with her a few times so she could get to know the man her sister was going to marry. She told him she wanted to keep it a secret from Madison and me because we would overreact. Then she convinced him to have sex as some sort of messed up way to prove he was worthy of loving Madison. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was so messed up. I could only apologize to her on behalf of her sister because she ruined her plans to marry the man of her dreams. AP regretted it immediately and begged Madison's forgiveness. She was crying on the phone with me, and I asked her what we should do. With barely a moment's hesitation, she told me she was dumping him. I told her I'd divorce my wife because neither of them deserved us. We made some kind of survival pact to get through this and come out wiser. 1 year later, Madison and I are seeing each other regularly. Our relationship is slowly turning into a romance. AP moved away as soon as he realized he wasn't going to get her forgiveness. He didn't even consider getting a place with my wife, because she was only a mistake. When my ex realized that's how he felt about her, and he was gone, she started calling me every day, several times a day, to beg me for a sleepover, a coffee, cake, and a chat. I declined every time, and only answered the phone if she wouldn't stop calling. She started camping in the yard, so I got a restraining order after the divorce was final. She was camping in the yard when her sister came over to hang out with me, and she lost her mind. I was prepared to call the police if she tried to come into the house, but thankfully, she wasn't that much of a threat. Since she had to leave due to the restraining order and trespassing, I didn't hear from her again. The last update I heard was that her dad had to bail her out of jail for something stupid. OP, your wife sure had some kind of crazy obsession with her sister's life. It ruined her and only proved what she feared the most, that her sister was a better woman than her. Comparisons can suck away anything good in someone's life. It was your wife's responsibility to be a mature woman who knew what was important in marriage: communication, honesty, and selflessness. She didn't know how to be an honestly supportive sister either. She'll never get to have a happy marriage if she continues to compare herself to others. You will never be able to have a meaningful relationship with someone if you do not learn how to be selfless and honorable. Stay grateful and content with everything you find in life. You did the right thing by refusing to give your wife a second chance after behaving like this. You are an example to others going through this level of betrayal. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories.